September 27th, 2024, 6:20 p.m. Beirut time. In the heart of Lebanon's capital, beneath the crowded streets of Haret Hareik, in the southern suburbs known as Dahia, a man sat in absolute darkness. 60 feet of reinforced concrete and earth separated him from the surface. The bunker had no windows, no natural light, just the hum of ventilation systems and the glow of secure communication devices. Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah, the most wanted terrorist in Israel's history, a man who hadn't slept above ground in 18 years, a man who had survived 3 assassination attempts in 2006 alone, a man who believes that his paranoia, his precautions, his network of tunnels and bunkers had made him untouchable. He was meeting with his most trusted commanders, planning the next phase of operations against Israel, coordinating with Iran's Quds force, discussing the rocket barrages that had displaced tens of thousands of Israelis from their homes. Above him, the city bustled with life, families preparing dinner, children playing in the streets, shop owners closing their stores for the evening. None of them knew what was coming. Because 6 miles above Nasrallah's bunker, 10 Israeli fighter jets were approaching. In their weapons bays, 83 one-ton bombs, each bomb guided not just by GPS, but by specialized beacons that had been planted just hours earlier, planted by Mossad agents who had infiltrated the very neighborhood where Nasrallah believed he was safe. In 18 minutes, Hassan Nasrallah would be dead. But this story doesn't begin on September 27th. It begins decades earlier. It begins with humiliation, obsession, and a promise that Israel's intelligence services made to themselves: never again. This is the story of the most sophisticated assassination operation in modern history. A story of deception, infiltration, and technology that blurred the line between intelligence gathering and science fiction. A story where pagers became bombs, where supply chains became weapons, and where the hunter became the hunted. This is Operation New Order. To understand how Hassan Nasrallah died, you must first understand why. October 7th, 2023, 6:29 a.m., the Gaza border. Hamas militants breached the border fence in 17 locations simultaneously. Paragliders descended from the sky. Pickup trucks loaded with armed fighters poured through the broken barriers. What followed was the deadliest day in Israeli history since the Holocaust. 1,139 people killed. Entire families executed in their homes. Music festival attendees hunted down and murdered. 251 hostages dragged into the tunnels beneath Gaza. The attack shocked the world. But for Iran and its proxies, this was just the beginning. One day later, October 8th, Hezbollah began firing rockets from southern Lebanon. Not a full-scale war, not yet, just enough to keep Israel fighting on 2 fronts, enough to stretch Israeli forces thin, enough to make northern Israel unlivable. And it worked. Within weeks, 60,000 Israelis had evacuated from towns and villages along the Lebanese border. Ghost towns, empty schools, abandoned homes. Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, called it the unity of fronts, the axis of resistance in action. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, all coordinated, all armed by Iran, all committed to Israel's destruction. By January 2024, Hezbollah had fired over 8,000 rockets into northern Israel. The psychological impact was devastating. Entire communities lived in bomb shelters. The economy of the north collapsed, and Hassan Nasrallah, from his bunker beneath Beirut, declared victory. But in the war rooms of Tel Aviv, Israeli commanders were planning something else entirely. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant wanted immediate, total war. Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi agreed.
destroy Hezbollah's rocket arsenal, invade southern Lebanon, finish what the 2006 war had started. But Mossad director David Barnea had a different vision, a vision that had been forming for nearly 2 decades, a vision that didn't require tanks or ground troops or thousands of soldiers, a vision that required patience, deception, and the most sophisticated intelligence operation ever conceived. And he had already begun.
The roots of Operation New Order stretch back to the summer of 2006. Israel and Hezbollah fought a 34-day war that summer. Israel expected a quick victory. Instead, they faced a guerrilla force that had studied every Israeli tactic, fortified every position, and turned southern Lebanon into a death trap of tunnels, bunkers, and hidden rocket launchers. The war ended in stalemate. Hezbollah claimed victory. Hassan Nasrallah became a hero across the Arab world, and Israel's intelligence community was humiliated. In the debriefings that followed, one question echoed through every Israeli intelligence agency. How did we not know? How did Hezbollah build 600 fortified positions without us detecting them? How did they amass 150,000 rockets without us stopping them? The answer was painful. Hezbollah's security was too good, their operational discipline too tight, their leader too paranoid. And so, Israel's intelligence community made a vow, a generational commitment. We will never be blind again. What followed was the most extensive peacetime intelligence operation in Israeli history. Unit 8200, Israel's equivalent of America's NSA, began by doing what they do best, signals intelligence. They intercepted Hezbollah's communications, cracked their encryption, mapped their networks. But they needed more. They needed human intelligence, agents on the ground, people inside Hezbollah's structure. And so they recruited, sometimes with money, sometimes with blackmail, sometimes with ideology. A low-level Hezbollah member drowning in debt, a logistics officer with a gambling problem, a technician who'd grown disillusioned with the organization. One by one, Mossad built a network of informants that penetrated every level of Hezbollah. By 2012, Unit 8200 achieved what intelligence officers call the big breakthrough. They hacked into Hezbollah's internal servers and downloaded a massive trove of data: personnel files, financial records, arsenal locations, and most critically, the locations of senior commanders. The target database exploded from 200 known Hezbollah sites to tens of thousands. Israel now had a digital map of Hezbollah's entire infrastructure. But knowing where someone is and being able to kill them are two different things. Hezbollah's leaders lived underground. They moved constantly. They used body doubles. They trusted no one. And Hassan Nasrallah was the most paranoid of all. Since 2006, Nasrallah hadn't slept above ground, not once. He lived in a network of bunkers beneath Dahieh, connected by tunnels, protected by layers of security. His location was one of Hezbollah's most closely guarded secrets. Even most Hezbollah commanders didn't know where he was on any given day. But Mossad was patient. They tracked his movements through electronic signatures, through the patterns of his security detail, through the testimony of their agents. Slowly, methodically, they built a picture of Hezbollah's underground world, and they waited for the perfect opportunity. Meanwhile, another opportunity was emerging, one that would change everything.
February 2024. Hassan Nasrallah appeared on television screens across Lebanon, one of his rare public addresses, delivered via video link from his hidden location. The speech was defiant, as always, warning Israel, promising retaliation, declaring Hezbollah's strength. But then, Nasrallah said something that made Israeli intelligence officers sit up and listen. He warned his fighters about Israeli surveillance. Your cell phones, he said, are Israeli agents in your pockets. They track your movements. They listen to your conversations. They know where you sleep. The solution, Nasrallah declared, was simple. Destroy your smartphones, go low-tech, return to older, simpler devices that couldn't be tracked or hacked. Use pagers, he said. Simple, secure, effective. In a Mossad operations center in Tel Aviv, someone smiled, because they had been waiting for exactly this moment. For years, Israeli intelligence had been gaming out scenarios. What if Hezbollah abandoned cell phones? What if they switched to pagers? What would that look like? How could we exploit it? Now, Nasrallah had just told them exactly what Hezbollah was going to do. The operation had a name, Operation Grim Beeper, and it had been in development for months, perhaps years, waiting for the right moment. The concept was audacious, insane even. Create a front company, manufacture pagers embedded with explosives, sell them to Hezbollah, wait, then detonate thousands of devices simultaneously, decapitating Hezbollah's entire communication network in a single moment. It sounded like something from a spy thriller, but Mossad had the capability, the patience, and now, thanks to Nasrallah himself, the opportunity.
Budapest, Hungary, a nondescript office building. On the directory, it read BAC Consulting, a telecommunications firm, legitimate on paper, licensed to manufacture pagers under the Gold Apollo brand, a Taiwanese company known for reliable, simple communication devices. But BAC Consulting was a ghost, a shell company created by Israeli intelligence. The office existed, the paperwork was real, but the company was entirely controlled by Mossad. The operation required precision at every level. First, they needed to manufacture pagers that actually worked. Hezbollah would test them. If the devices failed or seemed suspicious, the entire operation would collapse. Second, they needed to embed explosives inside the pagers without detection. The explosive had to be powerful enough to kill or seriously wound the person carrying it, but small enough to fit inside a pager battery. The solution was PETN, pentaerythritol tetranitrate, a military-grade explosive used in detonators and plastic explosives. Stable, powerful, and crucially, it could be shaped to fit inside a modified battery compartment. Israeli weapons engineers designed a battery that was half lithium-ion power cell, half PETN explosive. The bomb was tiny, between 1 and 3 grams, but in a device pressed against someone's body, that was more than enough. The trigger was equally sophisticated. Each pager was programmed to detonate upon receiving a specific encrypted message. The message would cause the pager to beep, drawing the target's attention. They would look down at the device, and in that split second, the PETN would detonate. The engineering was perfect. The pagers were indistinguishable from legitimate devices. They passed every security check. Hezbollah's procurement officers placed an order, 5,000 pagers. Israel delivered every single one. But there was a problem. The pagers arrived at a Lebanese port in early 2024, and there they sat for 3 months, waiting for customs clearance, waiting for Hezbollah's logistics network to distribute them. Every day the pagers sat in that warehouse was a day Israel risked exposure. A day some curious technician might open one up and discover the explosive. A day the entire operation could unravel. Mossad's operatives in Lebanon pushed from the inside, subtly expediting the bureaucratic process. By late summer, the pagers finally entered Hezbollah's supply chain. And then, something unexpected happened.
August 2024. Mossad Director David Barnea sent an urgent letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The message was clear. We need to act before the U.S. presidential election in November. Why the rush?
Intelligence indicated that whoever won the American presidency might pressure Israel to de-escalate. A new administration might not support aggressive operations against Hezbollah. The window of opportunity was closing. But then, in early September, another problem emerged. A Hezbollah technician in Beirut noticed something odd about his pager battery. It was slightly heavier than it should be. The weight distribution felt off. He reported it to his superiors. Worse, Hezbollah's Central Command decided to send several pagers to Iran for technical analysis. If Iranian bomb experts examined those pagers, they would find the PETN. They would discover the plot, and thousands of Hezbollah operatives would immediately discard their devices. The element of surprise would be lost. Netanyahu called an emergency meeting. Mossad, military intelligence, the Air Force, and the Prime Minister's inner circle gathered. The debate was intense. Some argued to wait. The pagers were meant to be part of a larger operation. Detonating them now would alert Hezbollah before the main strike against Nasrallah. But Barnea was insistent. If we don't act now, we lose everything. The pagers become worthless, worse than worthless. They become evidence of our penetration. Netanyahu made the decision. Detonate now.
September 17, 2024, 3:30 p.m., Beirut time. Across Lebanon, 5,000 pagers simultaneously received a message. The message appeared to be from Hezbollah's Central Command, routine, innocuous, the kind of communication that operatives received dozens of times per day. The pagers beeped. In supermarkets, men reached into their pockets. In cars, drivers glanced down at their belts. In homes, commanders picked up their devices from tables. At Hezbollah checkpoints, fighters grabbed their pagers to read the message. For approximately 7 seconds, the pagers emitted a continuous beep, and then they exploded. The explosions were small but devastating. The PETN charges detonated with enough force to shred flesh, shatter bone, and destroy eyes and hands. Because the pagers were carried in pockets, on belts, or held in hands near faces, the injuries were catastrophic. Across Lebanon, chaos erupted simultaneously. In a Beirut grocery store, a man collapsed, his hands blown off, blood pooling on the tile floor. In a car on the highway, a driver lost control as his pager exploded against his hip, the vehicle careening into oncoming traffic. In a Hezbollah office, 3 commanders were killed instantly, their faces obliterated by the blasts. The explosions continued for 90 seconds. Some pagers detonated immediately. Others, due to signal delays or network issues, exploded moments later. Hospitals across Lebanon were overwhelmed within minutes. The injuries were unlike anything doctors had seen. Traumatic amputations, facial destruction, blinding. The emergency rooms filled with screaming, bleeding Hezbollah members and civilians who happened to be nearby when the devices detonated. The final toll, 42 dead, nearly 4,000 wounded. Among the dead, 2 children, 2 healthcare workers, victims who happened to be standing next to Hezbollah members when their pagers exploded. Hezbollah's leadership was in shock. Their secure communication network, the network they'd adopted specifically to avoid Israeli surveillance, had just been turned into a weapon against them. But they had no idea that the worst was still to come.
24 hours later, Hezbollah gathered for funerals. The dead from the pager attacks were being buried. Thousands attended. Hezbollah fighters, commanders, families, supporters. The atmosphere was tense, angry, mournful. And then the walkie-talkies started exploding. Hezbollah had switched to handheld radios after the pager attacks, believing them to be safe. But Israeli intelligence had infiltrated that supply chain too. 14 more dead, 450 more wounded. The message was clear. Nothing is safe. No communication device, no supply chain, no technology. Israel had penetrated everything. Hezbollah's command structure began to fracture. Commanders stopped using electronic devices entirely. Orders were passed by courier. Meetings were held in person only. The organization that prided itself on military discipline and secure communications was reduced to operating like it was the 1970s. But Israel wasn't finished. Because the pager operation was never the end goal. It was the opening move. The real target was still underground, still breathing, still commanding. Hassan Nasrallah.
Finding Nasrallah had been Mossad's obsession for 18 years. The intelligence effort was staggering in its scope. Satellite surveillance tracked movement patterns around suspected bunker locations. Signals intelligence monitored electronic emissions. Human intelligence, spies inside Hezbollah, reported on security protocols, meeting schedules, bunker entrances. Unit 9900, Israel's visual intelligence unit, developed AI algorithms that could detect the slightest changes in terrain. A new ventilation shaft appearing overnight. Disturbed earth indicating underground construction. Vehicles arriving in patterns that suggested a high-value target. They mapped Hezbollah's tunnel networks beneath Dahieh. They identified likely bunker locations. They cataloged which bunkers were used for weapon storage, which for command and control, which for hiding leadership. But they still couldn't pinpoint Nasrallah on any given day. Until September 26, 2024. An intelligence source, likely a high-level Hezbollah insider, reported that Nasrallah would be meeting with senior commanders the following day, September 27th, at a specific bunker beneath Haret Hareik. Attending the meeting, Iranian Quds Force commander Abbas Nilfaroshan, Hezbollah's Southern Front commander Ali Karaki, and Nasrallah himself. It was the opportunity Mossad had been waiting for. But there was a problem. Even with the location confirmed, striking a bunker 60 feet underground with enough force to guarantee Nasrallah's death would require extraordinary precision. GPS-guided bombs alone weren't enough. The margin for error was too great. If the bombs missed by even a few meters, Nasrallah would survive. They needed something more. They needed eyes on target, a beacon, a guidance system planted directly above the bunker. And they needed someone willing to walk into a combat zone to plant it.
September 27th, late afternoon. While Israeli airstrikes pounded Dahieh, two Mossad operatives prepared for what might be a one-way mission. Their objective? Plant advanced targeting beacons on or near the building directly above Nasrallah's bunker. Their survival probability, as assessed by mission planners, 50-50. The operatives moved through the chaos carrying innocuous packages, aid supplies, personal belongings, anything that wouldn't draw attention. Dahieh was under heavy bombardment. Buildings collapsed, fires raged, people fled in panic. The operatives' handler made a calculated decision: keep the airstrikes going. The bombardment would force Hezbollah security personnel into shelters, clearing the streets. It would provide cover for the Mossad team's movements. It also meant the operatives could be killed by their own air force. They moved through alleyways, hugging walls, timing their movements between airstrikes. The targeting beacons were concealed in their packages, small devices that would transmit precise coordinates to the incoming bombs. They reached the target building. One operative kept watch. The other placed the beacon at a pre-surveyed location, a position calculated to provide optimal guidance to the weapons systems of the F-15 fighter jets already being loaded with bombs. The device activated. A signal pulsed upward, invisible, connecting to Israeli satellites and military networks. The operatives melted back into the chaos. Whether they survived, whether they made it out of Dahieh that night, that remains classified. But the beacon was active, and the bombers were already in the air. 6:20 p.m. Beirut time. 10 Israeli F-15I and F-16I fighter jets approached Lebanese airspace. Each aircraft was loaded with bunker buster bombs, specifically American-made BLU-109 penetrators. Each bomb weighed 1 ton. Each was designed to punch through hardened concrete before detonating. The original plan called for 40 bombs. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant personally intervened. "Double it," he ordered. He wanted no margin for error, no possibility that Nasrallah could survive in some protected pocket of the bunker. 83 bombs, over 80 tons of explosives, enough firepower to level an entire city block. Each bomb was guided by dual systems, GPS coordinates, and the targeting beacons planted by the Mossad team. The beacons provided real-time guidance, correcting for wind, atmospheric conditions, any last-second variables. The pilots received their final clearance. Weapons released. For approximately 15 seconds, 83 one-ton bombs fell through the sky over Beirut. And then they impacted. The sound was unlike anything Beirut had ever experienced. A continuous thunderous roar, as bomb after bomb slammed into the same location. Each impact sent shockwaves rippling through the earth. Windows shattered for blocks in every direction. The building above the bunker disintegrated. The structure pancaked downward, floors collapsing onto each other in a cascade of concrete and steel. Below ground, the bombs penetrated. Through 60 feet of earth, through layers of reinforced concrete, through steel supports. And then they detonated. The bunker became a tomb. In the streets of Dahi, people emerged from shelters in shock. A massive crater had appeared where a residential building once stood. Dust and smoke hung in the air like a fog. The smell of explosives and pulverized concrete choked the neighborhood. And deep beneath the rubble, Hassan Nasrallah, the man who had survived 18 years underground, who had evaded Israel's best assassination attempts, who had believed himself untouchable, was dead.
For 24 hours, the world waited. Israel said nothing, neither confirmed nor denied. Hezbollah, too, remained silent. No statements, no denials, no declarations of martyrdom. The silence itself was telling. Rescue workers dug through the rubble. The crater was enormous, over 60 feet deep, filled with twisted metal and pulverized concrete. The bodies they recovered were barely identifiable. On September 28th, Hezbollah finally confirmed it. Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah for 32 years, was dead, killed in the airstrike. His body had been recovered from the bunker. Also killed, Iranian General Abbas Nilfarushan, Hezbollah Commander Ali Karaki, and approximately 300 others, mostly Hezbollah fighters and commanders who had been in the vicinity. The Israeli Air Force released thermal imagery of the strike. The footage showed the moment of impact, a flash of heat so intense it registered from space. The ground literally glowed white for several seconds. In Tehran, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, convened an emergency meeting and immediately fled to a secure location. Paranoia gripped Iran's Revolutionary Guard. If Mossad could kill Nasrallah, if they could penetrate Hezbollah so completely, what about Iran's own security services? Senior Revolutionary Guard officers were arrested as suspect spies. Dozens of communications officers were detained. The regime began an internal purge, hunting for the moles that must have made this possible. Khamenei declared 5 days of national mourning. Hezbollah vowed revenge. They promised that Nasrallah's blood would not be in vain. And they immediately named his successor, Hashem Safiuddin, Nasrallah's cousin, a senior Hezbollah commander, the man who would lead the organization into its next phase. 7 days later, October 4, 2024, Israel killed him too. Same method, same result. Another bunker, another massive airstrike, another Hezbollah leader reduced to rubble. The message was unmistakable. There was nowhere to hide.
What began as a single assassination became a systematic campaign of destruction. Between July and November 2024, Israel eliminated Hezbollah's entire senior leadership. July, Fuad Shukr, Nasrallah's top military strategist and one of the masterminds behind the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing that killed 241 U.S. Marines, killed in a targeted airstrike in Beirut. September, Hassan Nasrallah himself. October, Hashem Safieddin, Nasrallah's successor, killed before he could even consolidate power. The list continued. Senior commanders, regional chiefs, weapons procurement officers, Iranian advisors. One by one, systematically, Israel worked through Hezbollah's command structure. The organization that had built itself over 4 decades was being torn apart in 4 months. But it wasn't just leadership. Israel launched thousands of airstrikes targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure. Weapons depots exploded in massive fireballs. Rocket launchers were destroyed. The 150,000 rockets that had held northern Israel hostage were systematically eliminated. By the time a ceasefire was negotiated on November 27, 2024, Hezbollah was a shadow of its former self. Over 4,000 Lebanese had been killed, more than 17,000 wounded. Entire neighborhoods in southern Beirut and southern Lebanon lay in ruins. The precision of the pager attack, 42 dead, had given way to the brutality of total war. And the question that haunts every military triumph began to echo. At what cost?